So now in part two of this video, we are going to talk about external conflict. Remember, external conflict is a struggle between the character and an outside force. It can be any outside force that's not going on up here because this is internal. Okay, there are 5 types of external conflict: character versus society, nature, technology, and supernatural. Now, I'm sure you've seen other things in the past like man versus man or individual versus individual. I don't like man versus man because there are times where it is not a man that you're fighting against, or it's not even 2 men that are fighting. And then I don't like individual versus individual because, again, same thing. I think of an individual as a human, and sometimes it's not a human, or it's not even a living creature. It's what the weather or something like that. So our first one here is a perfect example: Tom versus Jerry, character versus character, but it's not man versus man, right? But they're all interchangeable, and other teachers might use that. It's the same idea, okay? So just don't let it get confusing. But this is when a character struggles against another character. This is the most clear-cut protagonist versus antagonist. Sorry, protagonist. I want to say it versus against the antagonist. I like to think of everything as being the protagonist versus the antagonist, but this is clear-cut. Tom versus Jerry. We have our protagonist versus an antagonist. Although it could be interesting to look at this and ask yourself who is the protagonist in this and who is the antagonist in this, because it's never clear. It's whoever you're rooting for. So moving here, character versus nature. So this is when a character struggles with a force of nature. Now, this is interesting because it's not always clear cut what that nature is. This is usually the character trying to survive. So it can be clear cut like what you see here. It can be you versus a tornado, you versus a hurricane, you versus a snowstorm, a blizzard, a rain shower. But it can also be you versus an animal, a bear, a tiger, a wolf. It can also be you versus a sickness, cancer, or COVID-19. It can also be, though, you versus kind of like a part of nature. So not the weather per se, but like you versus the ocean. You're out in the middle of the ocean just trying to survive the elements of the ocean. Or you're stuck in a desert, or you're stuck in a rainforest, and just all the elements of the rainforest are coming after you. So it could just be a lot of different things there when it comes to character versus nature. What's important here is, again, sometimes it's not a clear-cut antagonist, but I mean, if a tornado is coming at you straight on, I mean, you are fighting against that. To me, that is something that is standing in your way, and that's the definition of antagonist, something that's standing in the protagonist's way, okay? Now, character versus society. This to me is the hardest one, but it's just a larger version of character versus character. This is when a character stands up to support their beliefs. Now, with this, the character struggles against the laws within a community. Now here we have one of the better examples of this, which is the Hunger Games, where Katniss Everdeen is going up against, President Snow and all the other districts. She's just standing against them. It could also be something as simple as one person standing up against a classroom, against a school, against a city, against a country. It's harder to identify what society is, but it's not necessarily a large group of people. That could still be considered character versus character. Like, for example, if I was walking down the street and got jumped by 7 guys, that would not be character versus society. That's character versus character, because the key here is you are struggling against the laws within a community. So you just have to think, what is the definition of community and what are the laws within that community, right? So that's where it is. So it's not character versus character can be more than one character. Whereas character versus society, it could just be against one other character, but that one other character is controlling the laws in which you are living in. Okay, moving on to our last 2, we have character versus technology. This one, to me, is probably one of the most straightforward ones. When a character struggles with something that is man-made. Also, this can be electronics, computers, phones, cars, etc. If your phone stops working, it's you versus technology. But another way to look at it is if the Terminator comes, that's character versus technology as well, because that is something that we made. If you can make it and it is attacking you or standing in your way or not working or whatever, it is character versus technology. Now, the last one here is character versus supernatural. This is probably one of the more newer ones that we started identifying. This is when a character struggles with anything at all that is beyond human control, understanding, or forces not of this world. If you go up against a ghost, a vampire, a werewolf, if you go up against, I'm trying to think of something else. Oh, like a demon or something along those lines. Just something that cannot be explained in our natural world, i.e. the other four are things that are actually in our world. Character versus supernatural, this is not something that's in our world. Superheroes, that's supernatural, okay? Now, an important note here, all right? An important note before we tie all this up is if it is one character, if it is the same types of characters, so if it's Superman versus his main, let's do Spider-Man. If it's Spider-Man versus Green Goblin, or if it's, I'm trying to think of the Avengers versus Thanos, those are not character versus supernatural. Those are character versus character. Now, if I, a human, went up against Thanos, got destroyed, right? But I would get destroyed. Or I went up against Superman, good luck, Mr. Black. That is character versus supernatural. Or if I went up against a werewolf or a vampire. But if it's a vampire fighting a vampire, that's not character versus supernatural. Okay, that's character versus character. So it's just kind of one little interesting thing to kind of think about there. But same thing with like a bear versus a wolf. It's not character versus nature anymore, and it's not nature versus nature. It's character versus character. So really quickly, just to end this, what is the purpose of conflict in a movie or TV show? And go ahead and pause that video and do that. And then when you finish, scroll down for me and just do these trailers. All right, digitally, you might have to go into the digital part of it, but do these 4 trailers for me, okay? Gosh, 7 minutes. This went way longer than I wanted. I am sorry for that. If you have any questions, as always, please do not hesitate to ask. This was part 2 of our conflict notes. Thanks for watching, everyone.